Sound check, sound check. How you doing, everyone? Recording this video live stream right now. If anyone has the opportunity to check this out, please come on in. I'd like to thank everyone who downloaded this video in the future and any present people. Here I am. Hey, what's up? Hello. Straight out of Arizona, we got Simply Lucian. Lucian. ¿Cómo está? Da way. Good son. Tao. Hello. In a Taino way, I'd like to welcome everyone to this video, or I should say this video in the future, download, and a live stream. I'm here in Borinquen. I'm still at work at Borinquen Health Center. I'm off the clock, though. If any of my bosses are watching this in the future. Doing some extra work, preparing for tomorrow. I'm a psychotherapist or behavioral health therapist here in New York City, Borinquen Neighborhood Health Center. And my true passion in life is Taino culture, indigenous Caribbean culture. And once again, my name is Sanakori Ramos. Sanakori is my indigenous Caribbean name, and Ramos is my family name. I'm also Sepulveda on my maternal side, Sepulveda. I keep looking over there. I should be looking here at the camera. So Sepulveda is my maternal. I'm from Guanica, Borinquen, a.k.a. Puerto Rico. My father's from Calle, a.k.a. Puerto Rico. And I was born in Brooklyn, New York, the great city of Brooklyn. As my mom always reminds me, I was conceived in Guanica, so that's cool. That's cool. So I got a little both worlds, both in the womb in Borinquen and right here in the earth, from Brooklyn, New York. And like I always often mention, we're always trying to get back to that womb. That's where it was safe. That's where it was quiet. We had everything given to us, I guess, the nutrition. Thanks, Mom. And it's very, very important to understand that our connection to our mother, our connection to another mother, Mother Earth, is intertwined. And this is the indigenous way, to honor and understand that we are all interconnected. It's a web. And throughout the centuries, throughout the millenniums, since day one of humanity, there's always been that struggle. How do we understand one another? How do we understand my community compared to that community, that country, and so on and so on. So today I just want to speak about during this Columbus holiday coming up on October 11th. For the past few days, I've been getting a lot of questions about Columbus. Was he that bad man? That history, recent history, especially indigenous history, we talk about, or he just got a bad rap. So around this time, the schools and in the month of October, this issue constantly comes up. On Monday, there's different states are going to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day versus Columbus Day. It's still a federal holiday, United States of America. And many states, most of the states continue. I believe there's only 13 that celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. So check this out. Why is this argument still around? Is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Is he a victim? Not a victim? Well, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of scholarly works or quotes. I'm just going to share from the heart. This is what I understand about Columbus. This is what I understand about my cultural history, my cultural identity as a Taino, or indigenous Caribbean male. Let's start with Columbus first. Let's get him out the way. A lot of history books, a lot of scholars. You know what? Let me look for one scholar. Hold on a second. Oh man, I'm looking through Google, and guess what? I erased it. Well, this is what I did earlier. I Googled Columbus, and I went straight to what they're teaching children in 2021. So I went on a website called Kiddle, Kiddle. I don't know who they are. I just, I went to the first site about children. You know what? Hold on a second. Sound check, sound check. Can people hear me? Lucian, can you hear me? I just want to make sure people are listening. Sometimes we get this issues with the mic. All right. All right. Indy 4-1 in the house, hostess of the Indigenous Power Hour show has said yes. And thank you, Lucian. Yes, you guys can hear me. Good, good, good. So I found this website, okay? 2021 website. I'm looking for it now. I just want to see what are they teaching children. I found this site called Christopher Columbus Facts for Kids. Okay. So they say he was born in 1451. He died in 1506. He was a Genovese trader, explorer, navigator. They say he was born in Genoa, Italy, around 1451. His real name is Cristoforo Colombo. All right. And that he landed in 1492, that famous year, in the island of the Bahamas. That's right. For all my friends out there who are from the Bahamas, the Lucano people. That's right. Hold on a second. Recently, there was a tooth found in Bahamas, and modern Taino DNA, like me and many of my other cousins, matched with that tooth. So Taino alive and well in the Bahamas. So then it goes on to talk about the discovery of America. See, kids are reading this. Discovery of America. So this says that Columbus was not the first European. So they go into the Vikings and stuff, which is quite interesting. And it says at the end, it says, oh, another point is that Native Americans have been living there for thousands of years in America. Oh, that's nice. And it says Native Americans did not record or contribute to the European record of history for obvious reasons. What are those reasons? It kind of doesn't say here. So if I was a kid, I'd be like, what are the reasons? So Columbus, therefore, discovered America in context of European history. There you go. Okay. So October 12th, 1492. Okay. San Salvador Island. He conquered the Holy Savior. Then he met the oh, there you go. Lucanian people, the Taino, the Arawak. Okay, they're teaching the kids some names here. Not knowing where he was and thinking that he had reached Asia, the Indies, he called them Indians, and he claimed their land as Spain's. Interesting. Columbus then sailed to what is now Cuba and then to Española, which we modern Dominican Republic. At the time, it was Haiti, then Quisqueya. And Columbus built a fort there. And this was one of the first European military bases in the Western Hemisphere. I guess that's important to teach kids that it was the first European military base. Interesting. And he called it the Navidad, which means Christmas. Christmas. That's an interesting calling a military base Christmas. Yo, that's not bad. He left 39 crew members there and ordered them to find and store the gold. He ordered them to find and store the gold. So I guess they found gold. Well, to find it and to store it. That's good. That's why. Sorry, I got there's some people texting me here. Um, hold on a second. There's a reason why I'm doing this, you know. Any questions? Please write it out. If you have any questions for me, this is like I already know like estoy en YouTube. I'm sorry. So check it out, man. So yeah, so that's kind of cool. I never thought of that. That the first European military base, he named it Christmas. Interesting. Okay. Now this is straight out of his words from his journal. For people who want references, check out his journal. That's a number one primary source. I know later on it was revised from Bartolomé de las Casas, who a lot of historians don't like. And there's a reason why they don't like him because he defended the indigenous people. He spent his whole life trying to write as much as he could eyewitness reports of what he saw. So I guess a lot of people don't like him for that. I guess they call him a snitch. Check this out. This is what he wrote. They ought to make good and skilled servants. Servants. Since they repeat very quickly whatever we say to them. So I guess if they say, hey, fetch me some water, they're very quick. I think they can be very easily be made Christians. Oh, there's that Christian agenda. But they seem to have no religion. Well, later on, he commissioned Ramon Panet to learn as much as he could about the religion. So I guess in the beginning, I'll give him a pass. He didn't know. I guess being nice and hospitable, giving food, I guess that wasn't religious values. I will take 6 of them when I leave so they can, so they, excuse me, so they may learn our language. With 50 men, you can subject everyone and make them to do what you wish. So right now we're getting we got a little, what do you call that word? Not word, but we got some insight into the mind, the attitude of Columbus. He's all into servitude. For those who think he's a nice guy, check that out. Now he noticed that some of the Arawaks or the Taino people or Lucayo had earrings, had gold earrings, clue, gold. He took some of them as prisoners and ordered them to lead him to the goal. However, they could not. At the time, it was known that our people, the Taino, my people, knew of the gold, but they went to South America in canoes and traded for the gold that was in South America. And they mixed it with copper, the guanin. Copper was considered actually more sacred than gold, and that mixture was very powerful. To this day, you have women, elderly people, they always support the gold bracelet, the copper bracelet as medicinal. Columbus was determined to take back both material and human cargo to his sovereigns. Check out the language. This is from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Columbus was determined to take back both material and human cargo. So I guess this website is teaching the children, which is kind of cool. They're bringing out the language that he considered. I, I don't know how you could. I don't know how those two words connect, human and cargo, because cargo is like property to his sovereigns. There you go, Ferdinand and Isabella, and for himself. Okay, so I interpret that as there was a lot of women in the islands that he probably brought with him. He used it for himself. And this could be accomplished only if his soldiers carried on looting, kidnapping, and other violent acts, especially on Hispaniola, present day Quisqueya. So now in this website, they're showing maps. They're showing a replica of Santa Maria. They're showing paintings of Columbus holding the Catholic flag, the papal flag, whatever, or the Spanish flag, I should say. There's drawings of them. There's the island. It's kind of cool. They're showing the kids some stuff. Human and cargo. Figure that one out. Did anyone ever have any response to that? People who are listening, cargo and humans. Wow. So let me just go back to these writings here. I'm especially reading this stuff for people who think Columbus was a good guy, or he was innocent, or he's a victim of history. Now here's a little part. Treatment of native people. While Columbus was away from Navidad exploring Jamaica and Cuba, his soldiers stopped working on building the new fort and the farms. And they made the Arawaks give them food. And they also stole things from the Arawaks. Okay. That's kind of cool. They're teaching the kids that, they stole and they and they demanded food. Not nice people. Now this made the Arawaks decide to fight back against the Spaniards. Okay, there you go. However, Spain had many weapons that the Arawaks have never seen, including steel, swords, pikes, crossbows, dogs, and horses. And this made it much easier for Spain to win these fights against the Arawaks. Interesting. So here they're painting the pictures, not so sweet. Now, watch this. Columbus also took revenge against the Arawaks for killing his soldiers at Navidad. Remember Navidad, the first European fort, Christmas fort? He made every native older than 14 years old to give him what they gave him? A certain amount of gold every 3 months. If they could not pay the gold, people will be made into slaves. Okay. So they're teaching the kids here in this website that if they didn't give them gold in 3 months, this is Columbus now. A lot of people think he's a nice guy or he's a victim. So right here is the evidence in his writings, in the writings of the Spaniards. This is what you call the introduction of the slavery industry. So people who argue that he wasn't such a bad guy, well, guess what? Columbus right there instituted slavery as an industry. Gold. Now, according to this, there was not much gold on the parts of the island that Columbus took over. And many Arawaks tried to run away from Columbus and his men. I guess he wasn't a nice guy because they ran away. However, Columbus soldiers used dogs to hunt them down. Let me just add some context here because I didn't add this. These war dogs, okay, were used against the my ancestors. When Columbus, he made it a habit whenever he found a warrior or a renegade warrior, or what I would like to say, an activist for the people. When he found one, he will hang them up, right? He will hang them by the hands and he let them, hang, and then they will put honey on the calves of the legs of these warriors, of these activists. Okay. And then the dogs, yes, you're right, the mastiffs dogs, the dogs would chew on the calves because of the honey, and the warrior will bleed to death. They'll leave him there bleeding to death. This is what Columbus did to establish discipline, and that was recorded by many of the Spaniards, including the La Casas. So I guess he's not a nice guy. He's not a nice guy. Who does that? Hangs you up, puts honey on your calves, and then devours you. A lot of historians say we can't use our moral judgment on historical figures in the past. We're taught that in college, we taught that in research. We just can't do that. Well, I have a problem with that. I always had a problem with that because my ancestors didn't do that. Many cultures didn't do that. Maybe some did. Well, Columbus definitely did. Now, when things got really, really rough, in other words, when it got rough for the Spaniards, they would get shipments of swords whenever Columbus came back. He had 4 voyages in total. Whenever he came back, he brought back new swords and weapons. The arquebus was the rifle used, the cannons, and check this out. Check this out. What the Spaniards would do, they'll take the sword, right? And they had a contest, I guess a soldier contest. Who can slice in half an indigenous person? Who can slice them in half in one sweep? And many times, as it was written, they couldn't do a clean sweep because there's a spine in the middle. That's bone. It's hard. So they will have these contests. Now they did not discriminate. They did not discriminate. Women, children, men, grandma, granddad, they were targets. They did not discriminate. Now you're probably saying, well, they didn't think they were human beings. The women, the women were used as sex slaves. They were used as sex slaves. Sex slaves. So now we have the introduction of the sex trafficking history here. Okay. Hey, what's up, El Conquistador? Bendición. Thank you for coming in. So not only did they slice the men and women and children in half with the swords as a contest of their soldier skills, but also they used the women as sex slaves. Let me go back a little bit. Remember that La Navidad, the first European fort in the Western Hemisphere, was named Christmas? Christmas Fort, let's call it that. The reason why the Taino people in that area fought and resisted the people there, the soldiers that were there, I think they said it was 35, is because they started raping the women. Now there was a tradition that was practiced by my people when visitors came from other villages, they will offer the women, okay, as for pleasure. These Spaniards took that for granted and they started raping the women. So here we go. Add that with the slavery introduction by Columbus. You got sex trafficking, you got slavery. According to the oral tradition, Columbus had a female slave, and her name was Doña Maria, and she had 8 children by him. So that is part of the oral tradition in the islands. I want to share that with you. So here we go. Most of these Spaniards had sex slaves, and they also would sell them. Bartolome de las Casas um, wrote about these horrible things before he died. He tried his best to um, to write as much as he could. So you got to check out his books. He has three major books called, or 3 volumes, I should say, of books. It's called The Complete History of the Indies. And then he has a more condensed version, The Brief History of the Indies. And he has other versions. He translated Columbus's journal as well. And he had other commentaries about it. Unfortunately, he spent most of his life in Hispaniola, aka Dominican Republic, aka Quisqueya, Haiti. And then towards the end, the church made him a bishop, and then they removed him from the islands, and he went to Chiapas, Mexico, where he died. But he tried his best before he died to write as much as he could. Now, a lot of Spanish scholars consider his work the Black Legend. That he exaggerated, he made stuff up. You know, so that kind of makes a lot of people angry in the indigenous world because here's a man who spent his whole life trying to understand. Wait, hold on a second. He tried to understand what he was witnessing. He even went on record saying that he never seen more devoted human beings, or he called them Christians. They are more Christian than the Christians. So De la Casas, I guess he can be the first historical Western snitch, according to the Spanish historians. For us, he did a good job because he left us these important facts. Again, I'm talking from the heart. A lot of stuff that I remember. But I was just having fun with this website of kids. Let me go back a little bit to that. The website is called Kittle.com. In February of 1495, Columbus started the transatlantic slave trade. This is what the kid workshop is saying. I mean, a website. He and his soldiers captured about 1,500 Taino. Only 500 could fit on Columbus's ships. So Columbus told his men they could take any of the rest as slaves. So they took 600 and let 400 go. Well, eventually they became slaves. Of the 500 natives that Columbus shipped to Spain as slaves, about 200 died on the trip. Half of the rest were very sick when they arrived. This was the first time that people have ever shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to be sold as slaves. First time people were ever shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to be as slaves. So that's in his website for kids. So that's kind of cool that they're teaching the kids this. This wasn't taught when I was in school, and many others. Now they say that Columbus went on another voyage in 1498. King John II of Portugal has said that there was a continent in the south. That's the Cape Verde Islands. A lot of modern Puerto Ricans have that DNA from those slaves. So on the third voyage, Columbus wanted to find this continent. So I won't go much into that, but Cape Verde is the DNA is very active in our blood. In 1498, in August, Columbus came back to Hispaniola, and there he found many of the Spanish colonists were very unhappy. They thought that they would find more gold, and some of them rebelled. Now here it is. The Spanish started to rebel against Columbus. So Columbus had 5 of the rebellion leaders hanged. So he hanged them. So I guess he didn't discriminate. He just didn't hang natives, but he also hanged Spaniards. Not a nice guy. So a lot of the colonists started complaining to Spain, yo, stop this guy. In 1499, Queen Isabella sent a man. I like this guy. His name is Francisco de Botadilla. He went to Hispaniola, or aka Quisqueya, and she gave him the power to do whatever he thought he could do, he should do. And when he arrived in 1500, the first thing he did was to have Columbus arrested and send him back to Spain in chains. This is when they arrested Columbus. So the queen said, please find out what's going on. I'm tired of these complaints. Francisco shows up. What does he do? Yo, Columbus, you're under arrest. You're going back to Spain. Um, According to history, Columbus wanted to appease the colonists. So he made the system called the encomienda system, aka plantation for slaves. So he would take the power of the cacique, or he will use their influence on the people, take the land, make the cacique like the foreman or the manager, and then the people will actually work on the land, not for their own, but for the Spaniards. Forced labor. Never been experienced in Taino history, because the cacique was responsible for the well-being of the village, make sure everyone ate, make sure everything was tight, the community, and so on. This was all taken away. I won't get into the spirituality yet, but so let me just conclude right here about Columbus. In 1506, he died of a heart attack or heart failure and arthritis. See, he should have got those copper bands. Maybe that would have helped him. Maybe he did. I don't know. Um, he still convinced himself that he found Asia before he died, according to records. Um, the reason why he didn't spend most of his life in jail was because he had hookups, and people in power got him out of jail. So he lived, as they say, some people, he lived in disgrace. He lived as a failure. Before he died, he tried to get 10% of the wealth that was accumulated by Spain, or that he started, and he failed. His descendants did the same thing. I guess they try to get the wealth as well, 10% of the wealth that he started, and they also failed 50 years later. Um, so these, to the very end, he tried to get that money that he thought was his. So Columbus is not a nice guy. And I'm showing a little evidence of what history says about him, what his own people say about him, well, his own European colleagues. And even the queen, believe it or not, the queen was concerned that she sent this dude called Francisco. So there's some red flags right there. Um, so let's get Columbus out the way. Basically, he's a bad guy. He was also a bad administrator. He was the first governor. They arrested him, whatever. Portugal tried to get some hookups with him, but he messed that up. So, what happened to the Taino people? What happened to them? The people that discovered Columbus. Well, I'm happy to say that we're alive and well. And through archaeology, we have known that around 7,000 years of indigenous history is found in the islands through archaeology, through the pottery, and so on. All up until 1000 CE, Common Era, up until 1500s, what we call the Classic Taino, from 100 CE to 1500s, probably the late 1500s. Well, early 1500s, because when the Spaniards came, or the invaders came, they destroyed the cacique political social structure. So if you want to look at the political social structure, I'll give it to you. That was decimated through force and through war. Like I said, the Taino were hung, the activists, the warriors were hung. Ana Caona, the famous cacica from Dominican Republic, Isquea, she was hung. Carnavo was hung. I mean, not hung. He died going to Spain in the ship. Um, there's this famous cacique from Borinquen, Puerto Rico, Mavo, Cacique Mavo. He dedicated his end of his days trying to collect the sacred objects or the sacred semis, and he tried to hide them in caves because the Spaniards they would gather as many spiritual items and they would put them on sale in auctions. So a lot of chiefs did that, try to save his money. That's why we find a lot of artifacts in caves. I shouldn't say artifact; those sacred are sacred. I hate to use the word objects too, because they're not objects; they're beings. Our sacred beings were found in these caves to this day. Whenever you find the semis and stuff in caves, that's it. These were the caciques that were hiding them. Man, there's so much to share. So So up until the late 1500s, the Galinago people, aka what the Spanish call the Caribs, they band together with the warriors, the Taino warriors, and they fought for many years. They fought against the Spaniards in the late 1500s. Okay, so what happened in the 1600s? What happened in the 1700s? Well, because they couldn't find gold, the Spaniards left the island. They said, "Yo, let's get out of here, man. There's no gold here." So where did they go? They heard about Mexico, New Mexico, right? They heard about Peru, and all these Spaniards left, or Europeans, they left. So who did they leave behind? They left behind the Taino women. They left the men, and they also left a lot of the slaves, the African slaves that came over that Columbus started. Remember that? And the Portuguese continued after the Spanish crown. Um, After they outlawed slavery, the Portuguese made sure that the slave trade was alive and well. So check this out. Now I'm getting hot right now. Any questions? Anybody got questions here? So basically, what happened to the Taino? Well, they just kept on living in the islands. When the Spanish were away, they just kept living. They kept surviving, and we find evidence of this as well. There's a famous semi in Italy, okay, and in this semi, it shows what happened to integration of cultures. There's a famous semi that has the face of a human and the back is of a skull. The beadwork, all right, is from Europe. They're actually using beads. They're also using glass, the mirror from Italy. The beads from Europe. There's the face of the human on the semi, the sacred being, is oh man, I forgot the animal. Rhinoceros horn. The eyes that you see, the white part, and I mean, I'm not the eyes. The eyes is glass, but the teeth is ivory from the elephants. So there's there's an integration where our ancestors did not say, "Oh, that stuff is not good." We use shells, or we use organic material. We don't want those things. They integrate it into their own spiritual worldview. That's very powerful. Our ancestors are teaching us, not to hate, but to embrace it and make it your own. Make it your own. Okay, El Conquistador, you said that the Caribs were aggressive towards the peaceful Taino. Any thoughts of this? Well, there's no innocent people when it comes to that, but I know that these are um, the Caribs get a bad rap. Well, I should say the Caribs. That's the word that the Spaniards use, referring to cannibalism. Um, Human beings, by nature, we're going to have conflict, and the Kalinago people and the Taino, Arawaks, they had conflicts. There's a lot of stuff written by the European version. I kind of don't trust those sources. But what I want people to remember, when the shit hit the fan, the Kalinago was right there with the Taino. And they said, let's band together. Now let's fast forward that to our time now, 21st century. We do note that the Kalinago language, the female line, does have the Taino language, most of the language there. So we do know that the women were probably kidnapped or taken or maybe intermarry with the Kalinago, because there was that tradition that the Kalinago um, rivals would intermarry from the Taino and the Kalinago. They would intermarry to maintain peace. So that happened. I think that happened more often than the kidnapping, personally, because this is what the Spanish is saying. Now I don't trust them. These Spanish scholars back in the day. So that's what they're reporting. I could be wrong, man. I could be wrong, but I like to say that it was the Galinago and the Taino. Once they had these intertribal battles, they actually boom. They actually they try to settle it through intermarriage and so on. I'm gonna take a little break here. I'll be right back. There's someone I have to speak to before they close up the center. I'll be right back. Please write any questions when I'll be back. Hold on. Sorry about that break. I just want to make sure I'm not locked out. So let's see. Oh, there was a message. There was a message that was held for review. To have sex with the other tribe or marry for peace. Yeah, I guess sex is a bad word in YouTube, so they blocked that for a minute. I just released it. Oh, there's a Taino man died in war and suicide. Spaniards bring black slaves. Yeah, there was that history about that. There was a lot of mass killings or suicides. A lot of people are arguing that now. A lot of scholars that because of well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned about that because I like to answer the question that El Conquistador asked earlier in his YouTube, that he mentioned why are northern tribes so why they stick the middle finger at Columbus, the historical Columbus, since they did not experience uh, the atrocities that the Taino experienced. Well, here's the thing: two things. One is the intergenerational trauma. Okay, um, this is a psychological term that's used and it's being treated right now in many of the tribes, many of war-torn countries. Intergenerational trauma. This is when a people have experienced a certain lifestyle. For us indigenous peoples, our lifestyle was being one with the earth. We planted the yucca. We had certain rituals that went with this yucca. Okay. We also, our marriages had a certain protocols. Our bejiques, the medicine, the spiritual warrior, or the spiritual leaders, the cacique, there was a structure for thousands of years. The way we planted, the way we farmed, the way we fished, the way we dealt with one another. For example, like I said, when there was intertribal battles, it would end in marriages. So there will be peace. And then all of a sudden, an invader comes, imposes their belief system, and they rape the women. They destroy the Semis. And this is one known fact: the Mayahuacan, the drum, the Taino drum. Whenever a Spanish saw those drums, they will burn them. The Semis will put on auctions. Those sacred beings will put on auctions. But the most harmful trauma experience was when they disconnected with their mother, Atabesh. Atabesh is the creatress. Okay, when they destroy our connection, okay, with the earth, now we became slaves, man. We became slaves to another entity, another people. And when we try to bathe in the rivers, our ancestors, the Batomena la Casa used to mention that we used to bathe like 3, 4 times a day. Why? And the Arawaks right now in Guyana will tell you the reason why. When you saw water that was sacred, that was a symbol of Atabe, the creatress. That's the veins of the mother. So you bathe in that blood, man. You bathe in that water, and you get the power. And they were forbidden to do that. It was a law passed. Columbus and his goons, you couldn't bathe anymore. And I know that's very important in the Santeria religion, the African religion, the indigenous, the water. Water is life, right? So that was forbidden. So right there, that's trauma, man. That's trauma. You live all your life for thousands of years saying that this is sacred. Now it's no longer sacred. Bam, that's trauma. And guess what? That same trauma was passed through the lines, the family lines, all the way here in the North America. Okay, those tribes in North America, the Mexica nations, the Aztecs, the Mayans, that's North America, man. They also were cut off. So little by little, they were cut off. Okay, when the invaders, they went up to New Mexico, the Pueblo Indians were there, the Hopi, the Navajo, they were experiencing that disconnect through armed force. When the United States government eventually went to the western part of the country, what did they do? They brought the U.S. Army, and they had a really arrogant leader named General Custer. Said, "I'll wipe them out." Now the Great Lakota Nation, they said, "All right, try it." Believe it or not, the Lakota Nation, the reason why they rebelled against the U.S. was that was the Lakota 38 when 200 warriors banded together, man, or more, and they fought against the U.S. You know why? Because they were put in a concentration camp, a war camp, because that was right before they were put on the reservation. Um, the U.S. they would complain about the food that were being given because they weren't allowed to hunt anymore. And then the U.S. government, U.S. Army said, "Well, guess what? We're going to give you less food if you want to complain." And eventually, they were starving to death, and they rebelled. It was over food. Of course, you're going to rebel, man. If they're not going to feed you, make you a slave. So that's the intergenerational trauma. This is why, yeah, you Indians, you're always angry. It's in our blood, man. The memory is in our DNA. It's in our DNA, Tao, Ricardo. So we have to deal with that. We have to heal from that, and don't forget the fire water, the alcohol. You know, that was another tool used. So it started with Columbus, the trade, man, the trade of slaves, the sex trafficking, what they did with these women. And I'm just talking about women. How about the children? When the children, when they were ready, okay. Well, why is Columbus the face of it all? Columbus is the face of it all because he's the first. He's the first guy that started. He's the kingpin. He's the boss. And he was so vicious that his own people rebelled against him. That the queen had to San Francisco, right? And they arrested him because they found the goods. They found that this guy's no good. Not only is he killing and destroying these indigenous people, but he's killing our own. So he died in 1506. He left a legacy that's still to this day. They call it the doctrine of discovery. Columbus was given the power, man. Whatever land he saw, the Roman Catholic Church gave him this power. Queen Isabel, Ferdinand were Catholic monarchs. You know, he took the ball and ran with it, and he went crazy. He went crazy. So we remember him as that monster at Cuco who took the ball and ran. And even his own people who gave him the power, like, dude, we got to get rid of you. He's still trial in Spain. He went to jail, man. 1500, he went to jail. So Columbus is I remember one day I was a security guard and I was guarding an exhibit in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was Picasso. And I remember people kept saying, "Oh, I can do that. I can do that. My kindergarten daughter can do that." So I remember after a while, I just started telling people, "Yeah, but he was the first one to do it. He's the first one to do it." Columbus was the first one who took 14-year-old girls and just allowed the rapes to go on. I have no proof that he raped a 14-year-old, but guess what? When you're talking about slavery, you're talking about slaves and sex, it went down, man. It went down. And they allowed that to happen. De la Casas, guys, you gotta read Bartolome de la Casas. He holds no punches. That's why they try to silence him. But he has a lot of works. You gotta read his books, man. He's the ultimate Spaniard snitch in their language, right? For us, he helped us out a lot. He owned slaves actually when he was a young man before he became a priest because his father was rich, and then he saw the atrocities. For anyone who's Roman Catholic right now or knows about the Christian faith, it was so bad that the priests refused to hear confession. And this is the high Middle Ages. This is not like liberation theology 1970s. This is high Middle Age. They refused. They even wrote a letter to Rome saying we can't hear confessions anymore. These men are violently vicious. They're raping, they're killing. And that motivated De La Casas to become a priest and eventually, try to advocate. Okay, talk about the Taino DNA. Very good. 'Cause I could talk all day about Columbus, man. All right, the DNA. Cruzado, 1992. The Caribbean islands was celebrating the 500 years of Christopher Columbus discovery of the Americas. Even Pope John Paul II went to DR to celebrate the evangelization of the Americas. And check this out. In 1992, when everyone's celebrating, they found these bones in Puerto Rico. I forget the town. I think it was in San Juan. But these bones were so messed up because the construction crew screwed it up so bad that the skulls were broken. It was no museum wanted these bones. So Professor Cruzado, Miguel Cruzado, Juan Cruzado from the University of Ponce took the bones, and he got a grant from NASA to do studies, genetic studies on these bones back in the 90s, late 90s. And then he took DNA from his students, hair samples from his students, DNA PhD students, and they compared their DNA with these bones that nobody wanted. 1990. So he came out with the study, and then I believe it was 1997, and the study was boom. Over 60% of these students matched this ancient DNA that was carbon dated around before the 1400s. Modern Taino people, you know. Oh, the apex of Taino culture. Bam! There's that genetic evidence. We don't exist. But guess what? 60% of those students matched. And it was through the maternal line. Okay? It was through the maternal line. So there was some historical evidence that because of the slavery, because of the killings, the men were either eliminated, killed, or moved to other islands. Back to Spain is evidence of that. They brought a lot of slaves to Spain, and they kept the women. Why you kept the women, not the men? Well, the men, the women, that's your sex slaves. So guess what? In my experience, using GEDmatch, GEDmatch.com, my DNA samples compared to other DNA samples, you have 12% to 25% DNA match with these ancient Taino people, pre-Columbian times. That dates back from my line. It was 1700s. That's when a Taino indigenous person in my line of the A2 haplogroup mixed with a European. In my case, it was a Jewish Ashkenazi person that came into my bloodline, and then the Portuguese, and then the Spanish. Now, the Portuguese and the Spaniards, they get a high percentage because they're the last ones that showed up in my DNA. So they get kudos for that when it comes to DNA. But if you remove them, that's 1700, 17, 18, 19. That's, less than 300 years of intermixing. So if you remove that, also the African, I can't forget that. When you remove that, okay, you got 7,000 years. And then I match, like many of, like 95% of Caribbean folk who've done DNA, they match with Clovis. Clovis is the oldest native ancestor in North America, the Clovis. So their ancestors found in Montana, their DNA shows up in the Caribbean. So I got 16,000 years of Native American history through carbon dating, through DNA, compared to maybe 250 years of European influence. So who am I? Just doing the math. I'm indigenous, man. I'm indigenous. Now, I'm not a Taino 1492. I am not Taino 1492. It will be an insult to my ancestors if say, yo soy Taino, just like my ancestor 14. No, no, no. There's an evolution that took place. Just like the solidoids became the ostenoids, okay? And the ostenoids became the Taino, and then the Taino became what we are now. We're still evolving, man. This is natural. This is natural law. We're evolving. But I am indigenous with European and African blood or ancestry. When you look at my DNA from the Spaniards, you see Spaniards, and there's plenty of poetry. I can't quote it right now, but there's plenty of poetry talking about how the Spanish came to Puerto Rico and the islands looking for Indian women in the 1800s. So if they came look for Indian women in their language, there were Indian women around the 1800s. I'm not talking, they were going up those mountains looking for Indian women. They wrote poetry. This is Spanish writing poetry about these Indian women. So if you're looking at blood quantum, hey, that's cool, man. If you're into blood, there's plenty of blood there. But we're not into blood. We're into culture. Okay, we're into culture. So, okay, but I think, okay, let me hear this. Conquistador said, I am proud to have Taino in me, but I think it's wrong to deny the majority of Spanish and Portuguese and lesser African portion and only identify as Taino. You know what? There's a lot of people who I know personally who are very proud of their Spanish blood, their Portuguese connection, even their Asian. A lot of people come with Asian blood. Yo, go with that. Embrace it. It's yours, man. I'm telling you. I'm not saying don't do that. But my heart, my spirit tells me que yo soy indígena. I'm Taino, man. You know, my DNA tells me that, and it tells me all these mixtures too. But I identified as indigenous. Many other people, there's people in my own tribe, Arayeke Yukayek. We identify as Taino. Our principal chief, Stephanie, she's related to everyone in the tribe. Not me. There's some that we're not related. So, but check this out. That's proof right there. So we're using science to help people connect to their roots. So, bro, it's totally cool, man. You want to be Spaniards, go to Spain or learn the Spanish language. I mean, it's all good, man. Portuguese. I have 11% African, and a lot of the tribes that came up in my profile are those slaves, man. Exactly those same countries where these slaves came. So I honor them, but I feel more free to say I am indigenous. It makes me happy to say that. But I also honor all these different influences in me. I don't want to cut myself in the throat. But there are a lot of people, I just want to say there's a lot of people who are claiming Taino heritage. And you can have 1% blood. There's a lot of people who tell me I only got 1%, so I'm not native. You are, man. What does your heart tell you? What does your heart tell you? What does your spirit tell you? Who you are? So a lot of us, we carry, for me, you know how I know you're Taino? You know how I know you identify as indigenous? Who wants to do that? Who wants to claim indigenous identity? It's the worst thing you could become in the world in 21st century, right? 10 times, if you're a woman of indigenous heritage, 10 times more likely you will be murdered or you will be found missing. Okay? Missing or found murdered. Who wants to be indigenous, man? The indigenous community is the number one here in North America. I'm talking about number one killed by the police. Okay, Native Americans or indigenous. Here in East Harlem where I work, a lot of the Mexicanos get who are indigenous. They get a lot of violent actions against them. A lot of crime, hate crimes against them. Let me see. Indigenous believe even if you're the indigenous not into blood, man. They're into action. See how you live. There's a tradition in many of the tribes that you can be any color, you can be any culture, right? And if they love you, they want to adopt you. They're going to adopt you. They're going to bring you in. It's how you live your life. Our ancestors did the same thing. We gave the Spaniards, we gave them food, we gave them love, we gave them peace, we gave them structure. We taught them how to fish. How you think the Hibaro culture? Where did the Hibaro learn how to grow yucca? How did the African slave learn how to fish? Africans were not allowed to go by the water, by the ocean. They were not allowed. They would get beaten. Why? Because the African slave would jump in the ocean, swimming back to Africa, and they would drown. The Spanish didn't like that because that's a piece of property right there. and I can't afford to lose property because that's gonna hurt my cash flow. And while country was looking for, oh, that's right, man. Ricardo Crespo, we mentioned this in Taino Radio that while the country was looking for Gabby Bitito, our sisters and mothers and wives were going missing at an insane rate. It's two Americas. There's two Americas, unfortunately, and there's in the universities. There's two histories. There's the European history and there's our history. That's just the way it is, man. You know, when indigenous women goes missing, that's what it is. When a white American goes missing, that's just the reality of it, man. It's all over the news, and that's cool. I hope her family finds justice, but that's the way the system's set up. Colonization, colonization. That's what Columbus left behind. Doctrine of discovery is, which is a papal bull that's still active in the Roman Church, and I couldn't believe that the Pope finding all these missing, all these massive mass graves of children of indigenous heritage in these boarding schools. He says we all need to heal, but he refuses to ask for forgiveness. So, my brothers and sisters, I got Taino radio show coming on later. I have to prepare for that. I'd like to thank everyone for coming in. And when you see a Taino, show them some love. You know why? Because we beat the smallpox. We survived the invaders, the policies set by Columbus. Queen Isabella tried her best to help us, but you know how that went. So listen, give us some love. Give us some love. When you see an indigenous person, give us some love. Okay? It's all about accepting, and that's what love is, I think, accepting the other. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Hey, man, we're all one people. We're all related. We're all related. Matakio Watson, we are all related, man. I'll see you all soon. Thank you.